Hey there, this is B. Wendy Jackson. I wanted to quickly interrupt you before you listen to the next episode. Listen, thank you for your support with the podcast. Those of you who've been following me since January 2020, I really appreciate you. I want to hear from you. You can send me a message at info@AAOP as in Paul, C as in Charlie, S as in Snake.net. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you have not rated and reviewed the podcast, would you do that for me, please? It also allows people to find the podcast. This is growing. The podcast is growing, and I'm so excited. I've had to update my little commercial because my name has changed and my website has changed in terms of where you receive the books. So if you have not purchased your books, I got the opportunity and the gift to write two books. The first one is Empowerment for You, Encouragement for Your Emotional and Spiritual Wellness. Listen, I love this book. It is definitely a book that invites you to experience hope, help, and healing. And every page, every chapter is really filled with insight, information, and inspiration to be able to help empower you, to be able to help you walk in freedom. I include specific practical tips to help you take charge and take possession of your thoughts and really just control your behaviors or impact your behaviors and impact some changes in your life, cause some changes in your life. And then the second book is Empower to Empower You Reflection Workbook. Love this book as well because it's based on specific podcast episodes where you listen to some episodes and you are able to dive deep into some reflection. I give you some prompts so that you don't have to wonder or think about, well, how do I start to reflect? What do I even write? The prompts are already provided for you. Isn't that awesome? So there are also blank pages for you to journal or whatever you want to do, right? And so I just invite you. You can go on Amazon and just look for B. Wendy. So I don't want to cause any confusion. My maiden name is Bob. So people have known me as B. Wendy Bob for so long. And then July 2022, I was blessed to be married. And so now I'm B. Wendy Jackson. So Amazon, you could just search for the books B. Wendy Bob, and you will find those two books come up. If you have any questions, you could email me. You can also find the resources on my website, AAOPCS.net. That's AAO, P as in Paul, C as in Charlie, S as in Snake.net. Listen, I look forward to hearing from you. May the the books continue to add value to your lives. I'm really thankful for this opportunity to just encourage people all around the world. All right. Enjoy the next episode and have an amazing day on purpose. Well, hello, everyone. This is your lovely host, B. Wendy Jackson. I hope that by the time you hear this podcast, that you are doing well and feeling well. I hope that you got a chance to get away over the past holiday for just to honor those who have lost their lives for memorial and those who are still grieving the loss of loved ones. I just want to pray that you're comforted today and that you find strength today. This is B. Wendy Jackson with Empower to Empower You podcast. This podcast is about all things Jesus Christ, faith, mental health, anything to help you become the better version of yourself and to improve and to grow and to develop and to thrive, because we're not here just to survive, right? All right, I know that many people are listening from all over the world, including the United States. I personally represent St. Lucia and the United States, so welcome if you're listening from the Caribbean as well as internationally. I'm excited to be here. This podcast, for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, this podcast has been launched or been going since January 2020. And so I'm excited to be here almost my third year, going into the fourth year of podcasting. And so those of you who've been listening since then, thank you so much. I really appreciate every one of you who have either rated or reviewed the podcast as well as shared it, downloaded, subscribed it. I see the stats growing as people are listening and tuning in. So thank you so much. And if you have not rated and reviewed, would you do me this favor? Just take a moment on your podcast app on your phone and just rate it and review the podcast. All right. Well, I am excited here because I get to have I want to call her doctor, but I'm being jovial right now, but she might as well be a doctor, Her name is Christin Webb. I'm so honored. I met this lady one time and I was like, I've got to have her. She has a magnetic smile, a magnetic personality. She's a motivational speaker. She's a confidence coach. She's a leadership enthusiast. She is a creative and business expert. And she literally uses her dynamic ability to connect people with themselves and others and to bring awareness to confidence and leadership. Anything about leadership, confidence, Christin is your person. She is the CEO of the Greater You Leadership Series, which is a leadership development and consulting agency. And she has over 20 plus years combined executive leadership and business experience. Christin loves, she has a passion for development of leaders through standard and customized workshops, courses, conferences, podcasts, keynote speaking, coaching, and more. She truly believes that you cannot stumble upon greatness. You walk up to it and introduce yourself. So I want to welcome Miss Christin Webb to the Empower to Empower You podcast. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. I'm so glad to be on here and I feel empowered already. I don't know who you were talking about just so glad to be here. I really am. And hello to everyone listening in.
Yes, my pleasure. I met you one time. This was my first time meeting you just at the Tell It Now conference. It's so good to, as you never know who you connect yourself to, and then you meet other people, and then it just creates a domino effect. And I met you through Sharon Rook's the Tell It Now conference under Jumpstart Your Business and Power Media Solutions, and you were the MC. Was that your role? Like you were the MC? I
was the MC, the hype man, whatever you want to call it. I was doing whatever Sharon told me to do for the day, but I was supposed to kind of keep the crowd motivated and engaged. Yeah.
And you did just that. You did just that. And I was like, who is this beautiful, poised leadership group, like person standing in front of me? And I was just like, oh, I've got to get her on the podcast. I've got to hear more of her story. I got to, get close to her to kind of see, okay, what does she do? What is it? I want to be curious about this person. I love that. I love that. So I'm so glad to have you here. And let's jump in. Talk about your journey. How did you get here? Get so passionate about leadership and motivating others.
So for me, I don't even know where to start, but for me, I think the reason I'm most passionate about leadership is because I have had so many life experiences. Could have been when I was. I'm sorry.
Repeat that because there was a gap. I think the thing kind of cut you off a little bit. Yes.
Yeah. No problem. I was saying in all of my life experiences, I've always seen a leader, I would call them, just really be able to garner people together, bring people together and move them in the same direction, like influencing them. And I've seen it done negatively too, right? Sure. But when I've seen it done right, and I can go back as early as when I was in the choir singing as a kid, and the choir director, right? We don't even think of individuals as choir directors, as leaders, but from individuals like that, all the way to when you go to school, you have your teachers. When you get into your when you start working and you're working, there's a leader that probably impresses upon you with just these amazing traits. And I've just always watched amazing leaders and wanted to be able to use some of those great qualities and be able to impress that upon with each other, upon others. I'm sorry. I am a type A. Okay. I must say that I am a type A, but because of that, I think it really, I want to help make everything as good as it can be, right? And so that goes into human beings as well, and it goes into leadership. And the times that I've seen where leadership has not been effective, I want to make sure that I've always steered away from that. And then I can help others see that as well so that they can steer away from those things so that we can really make impact. So I just love all things leadership. I've always taken classes in leadership. I've always paid attention and dissected leaders in my own way, whether you think I'm doing it or not. But leaders create success, and leaders create impact, and leaders create change when they're doing it effectively. And I just always want to be a part of that. So.
I love that. So would you say as a child that you always found yourself, if you were to look back, sometimes I have clients, let's take a look back at like what experiences in your life impact the person that you are today? Like, can you see the connection between that child who was always at the front of the line, or that child who just couldn't fit in with a group of friends. You were always just kind of like the standout like person. Can you see the connection?
I can. I always start with the example. I'm a twin. Shout out to Christina.
Oh
Um,
my gosh, I
right,
didn't know that.
I'm a twin sister. We're 28 minutes apart. I'm a twin. Bless my mama's heart. But no, I remember as early as when we were 5 and 6 years old, I love to write. I'm a writer by heart. My dad was a writer and I kind of followed him, but I would write plays. And I didn't have anybody to act them out. Like I needed somebody to act them out with me, right? I can't just have this wonderful literary piece and nobody can actually act it out. And so I would, influence, quote unquote, or encourage my sister, my twin sister, to act out these characters with me. And so as early as that, right? And then I convinced my grandmother, I convinced my father, I convinced others to come in and sit at this particular time that I've said, this is when the stage play is happening. And they'd all come in and they watch me and they root me on, right? Probably one of the most boring plays ever, who knows? Right? Very, 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 very elementary like, but at such that early age,
Wow.
I saw that I had the ability to kind of convince or influence or create buy-in and delegate, tasks to others to get them to come together for this simple purpose. And I know what I gave was like the most elementary example. But leadership,
I love that example. I mean, you were leading as a child. You learned. So if I were to bring in your parents and your family and to say, how did you see, or what examples did you know? Like you saw Christin and you just knew that this is a future leader here. There's something about this child. I'm sure that each and every one of them will be able to give an example or say, oh yeah, we knew like what she's doing now. We saw that, years before.
Right. I always envision myself as, I don't like to use the word now, but back then I envisioned myself as a boss. I envisioned myself in the heels and the pumps and the suitcase. I didn't know what I was the boss of. Right. But to me, it equated like influence. It equated power. It equated really being able to create change and impact. And I created those images by what I saw, right? It was the ladies in my church. It was my 6th grade teacher, Miss Campbell, who I thought was so distinguished. And the way she led with such grace. It was the Maxine Smiths with the NAACP that was in my church, right? I had those kind of civil rights movement people in front of me that were leaders that helped me shape who I am today, right? So I know I feel like I'm going on and on and on, but
no, this is good. You actually went on to the next question. Like, what are some examples of like leaders, great leaders and motivators who influence you? And you gave an example. I would have never thought of a choir director as a leader, but you're right. They are leading the choir, or teachers. They are leading. And I think a lot of times people think of leaders as the person sitting on the top of a corporate, corporate role. People think of leadership as just the executive staff on the board, but you could lead from wherever you are. In whatever stage that you're in whatever your gifting or your talents that you've been given, you can lead from that and not necessarily having to be at the forefront of everything. And so I just love that you watched even the everyday people that served you, and you saw them and you look for examples of, I want to be a leader like that, or nah, I don't want to be a leader like that.
Right, exactly. And it's good to evaluate both, right? And those were the people I could touch. But I mean, it was even the images on TV, and I always I'm not going to get on my soap. It was the Claire Huxtables I saw. It was the Diane Carrolls that I saw on TV, right? Just really sharp women that were on top of their game in whatever industry they were in. And I think Claire is the only one I knew what she really did. She was a lawyer. But I mean, these were boss ladies, quote unquote, as I called them. And I was like, I want to create that kind of influence, and I want to be fly doing it. So yeah.
I love it. I love when you start to connect the dots from like childhood to adulthood. It's amazing when you can see the connection. So you mentioned earlier, something you said earlier, and it's not on you don't know that I'm going to ask you this, that you are type A, right? So how do you, there's a fine line between perfectionism and doing things with the spirit of excellence. How do you draw that line?
Being realistic.
Hmm.
I think it's more about being realistic. So we can strive for quote unquote perfection.
Right.
But what we really should be saying, to your point, is we're striving for excellence. We're trying to make sure that we do our due diligence in every step of what we're after, right? And I think if I don't at least do that, then I'm missing the mark, right? So that's where my type A comes in. It's not that I am always well, I have to make sure I'm being realistic. I'll say that.
It's
Not that
hard.
I'm unrealistic, but I do have to take a moment, step back and say, oh, okay, Christin, what are you really doing here? Is that something really attainable? Is that really a smart goal for you? And if it's not, I need to back away from it, or I need to, be agile, and I need to tweak it, and I need to say this, or I need to just honestly accept what the outcome and what the reality is, and maybe it's going in a different direction.
Yeah. It's hard though. That's hard because
really it is.
it takes a lot of intentionality, because even though that's a whole nother episode, but even the what you said, I want to make sure I don't miss the mark. Well, that can vary per project, and
Absolutely.
sometimes because there are people who really struggle with that perfectionism, and they might say, I want to be excellent, but it's like, if I don't miss the mark, it wasn't good enough. Or if I don't miss the mark, I wasn't successful, right? And maybe while in this journey of trying to like not miss the mark, there were so many wins.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only looking at the mark because I'm so like driven, right? I could miss the impact I made along the way and just focus on, I didn't get that A+, so I failed. Right. So sometimes we can have this unhealthy mindset as leaders on this journey towards, well, how do we redefine what success means? Like, is it getting all the things done, or is it just that once impact? Was somebody impacted by? Was it just one person that I was able to impact in my speech, or whatever I'm doing, whatever it is I'm doing?
Absolutely. Was I better? Am I better today than I was yesterday?
Yes.
Even
Yes.
if not in leaps and bounds, right?
Yes.
Even if in just small ways. So yeah, it's being realistic, it's being honest with yourself. It's being okay to have to change and switch.
Absolutely.
But yeah, type A, I am that.
Yeah.
But I definitely work to try to be realistic. And from a leadership standpoint, that can be some kind of limiting as far as the way we allow others to lead, right? So we have to be mindful of that. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here, and I wrote down this word because this is one of my core values for the Greater You Leadership series, which is self-awareness. And, if you are not tapped into who you are, understanding your strengths, your values, the things that you bring to the table, even those areas that we need to work on, those opportunities that I like to call them. If you don't have that level of self-awareness, then, it doesn't matter if you're type A, B, C, D, E, F, right? You'll never navigate the pros and the cons of those spaces if you're not aware of yourself. You'll never navigate them most effectively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is a great segue into, I was reading your bio, and one of the things that you mentioned is that you've seen in your work, the Greater You Leadership series, just your coaching and your motivating, that a lot of times you've seen the lack of confidence in as an issue that impacts so many people who are actually serving as leaders, or even people who want to be leaders. Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen that show up for people?
I've seen it show up in negative self-talk.
That's a big one.
That's a really big one. Self-doubt. We already count ourselves out before we even let the idea birth, right? Before we even let the idea fully come out and really manifest in our minds, before we even take next steps and write down what it is we want to do, we automatically, or sometimes I've had clients, or I see where others are struggling with confidence because they talk themselves out of it. It's self-critiquing, it's self-doubt. It's a tendency to focus on weaknesses or failures more than we do focus on our strengths, which I think sometimes we focus on, man, how could I be better? When, oh man, you knocked it out the park today. Don't even worry about what you did wrong in that moment. Just celebrate the moment now of how well you did. So it's that constant intentionality, as you mentioned, to not have that negative self-talk. Another example of maybe someone who's struggling with confidence is someone who avoids challenges, And challenges could look like conflict, right? Conflict with self. Let's start there, right? We avoid conflict within ourselves and we don't work on that self-awareness and that self-improvement. We don't go after the goals that we want because we think they're going to be too hard. I can think my first book I wrote, I published it in 2012, but it took me 6 years. And while I was writing in that 6-year period, I also was experiencing, oh, I don't have the money to do it. How am I going to get it done? So I didn't really push to get it published right away. And over time, I had to become more confident in either I want people to hear my voice on paper or I don't, right? They're either going to hear it or they're not. And so that was a challenge I had to get past. But a lot of times people avoid those challenges because we're fearful of that failure or the rejection or judgment. And then it's so many other examples. So I don't want to go just down the list. But perfectionism, when you said that one kind of stung. That one stung, but that seriously is a way for you to identify, maybe my confidence isn't where I need it to be because here I am trying to be perfect and it's not realistic and I'm overdoing it and stressing myself out. You'll never be satisfied if you are striving for perfectionism, and it's going to impact your confidence and is going to have a rippling effect in other spaces in your life where you may not even be experiencing low confidence, but always trying to be perfect. It's just not healthy and it's not sustainable.
Absolutely.
And definitely a sign of low self-esteem.
Absolutely. And I know that list is longer, right? I mean, it would be a speech, a seminar by itself. And I know these are things that you teach, but even when you're talking about, even as we mentioned, perfectionism, I've seen so many clients, and even I can say that I'm falling into that pit. What it does, you become stuck in this junction called paralysis analysis. Mm-hmm. I've seen people just getting ready to get started. I'm getting ready to get started. I'm getting ready. But we stay stuck in the getting ready because we analyzing it over and over and over again. We editing it, we're proofreading it, we're doing all the things, and then we got paralyzed by that and we never start. And I almost didn't start this podcast for that reason. Wow. Well, will people listen to me? Will people listen to this? Like, is it really going to be effective? Do I even know what I'm doing? All the things that you've mentioned that even I as a mental health clinician and practitioner has struggled with that, right? And probably because we're human. Absolutely. And I think people forget that we are human.
You may know some strategies, but you're human and you're having to be mindful of those strategies and use them for yourself. So I'm a social by trade. I didn't mention that. So you have to, it's constant. You can have all the answers, but sometimes it's hard to apply to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So let's get into your confidence coach. And so you mentioned, okay, here are some examples of what this looks like. And as people are listening, I really want them to be like, oh my gosh, that is me. Like I know that, first of all, I didn't even think of myself as a leader. I could just hear people resonating with what you're saying. That's what we want. That's what we want, right? We want this to make impact. I want people to listen. As you're listening, you can hear Christin and you can say, hopefully, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of myself as a leader. Or, yeah, I think I can lead, but I self-doubt. I'm always doubting myself. I'm always questioning myself. I do think of myself as I don't have the skills to be a leader, or I disqualify myself before I even get started, and all the things that you just mentioned as people are listening. Well, what are some examples of how you help them in your work? So they've come to you for reaching out to the confidence woman, the confidence coach. And what are some examples? First of all, they have to acknowledge that I don't have the confidence. I would imagine.
There has to be some initial, I always like to say somewhere in their shanana, they see something that says I'm struggling. Like I'm limiting myself. There are some barriers that are keeping me from doing something. And ultimately, I'm not happy with myself about something. So how do I come out of that? How do I get past maybe one specific instance that I'm experiencing, or maybe this long-term life impacting something I have to come across? But it is that initial assessment and truth to self that leads you to, say, a therapist or to a confidence coach. And I'm simply just someone who specializes in helping individuals build and develop their self-confidence. And I always say any type of coach, specifically when we talk about confidence coaches, I don't have the answer. I always say the client, the individual, the participant, whatever word you want to use, but they are the individuals who already have the answers. The coach's role is simply to use strategies to try to help pull that out. And so I like to do that through, obviously, we do some initial assessments. I love to ask questions. I like to say we're having more of a conversation most of the time, because I want it to be as transparent and a space where you're able to feel vulnerable. And I think that's really important when we talk about confidence. A lot of classes that I do in confidence, I try to keep them small if I'm doing like group coaching, because you want to keep them small so people can feel more comfortable and more open and more willing. And so when we're having that initial assessment, we can really start to pull back layers, right? And really understand what may be really rooted there. Because when we come out of the assessment, there is more awareness that you have about self. So that's what we're working on when we're doing this confidence coaching, doing an assessment, seeing where you are, what is it, what are the goals that we're trying to get from this coaching opportunity, but even beyond that. And so we look at your self-awareness, and then we start to look at these barriers or these challenging, limiting beliefs that you have. That's really important because a lot of times, we talked about it just a minute ago. We're talking ourselves out of things. We have things that happen to us in our childhood. They carry over into relationships, carry over into our workspaces. So what are some of the limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves in different spaces? So we have to explore that as well. And once we kind of break all that down, then we can start talking about what are the things that we can counteract and use to strategize beyond that, right? It may be, hey, let's talk about affirmations. Let's create this affirmation plan, right? Let's create this self-care plan, working together, really more of the input coming from the client on what works best for them so they can create this curated method of getting their confidence up. And I've seen it take, one day for a specific task, and they're able to kind of strategize and move forward. And I've seen, hey, we need to talk a couple of times, because it's recurring, or it's taking longer to move past it, right? Or just more skills need to be built up. So that's it in a nutshell, right? I just try to make sure that I allow the client to drive, allow the client to find their own answers. And just really be a catalyst, or some kind of fluid, I'll just say catalyst to the other side.
Well, and I love what sets, one of the things that I know sets you apart is that you are a social worker. So you're trying to build efficacy, and you're doing that. Even I love how I see you, Christin Webb. I see you. I love how you weave that into your coaching. I love that. I mean, that is something, being social workers set us apart. It sets us apart. I mean, being a leader without that, I'm not saying you can't be effective, but social work allows you to be able to connect with people, build relationships with people, and develop, inner strength and efficacy, and build them up, and all the things. And so I just love that. And so let's kind of dive into your services. Talk about your services. Take a minute to talk about what you offer, the Greater You Leadership Series, and what's coming up on the calendar. How can people contact you? Let's kind of dive into that.
Awesome. So yeah, currently we provide workshops. And let me start over. We are a leadership development and consulting agency, and we help to develop leaders from the inside out. And we do that through a series of workshops and courses, online panel discussions, special events. I have conferences, all those different things. But I love to go in specifically with the workshops and teach leadership. And teach some of these intrapersonal and interpersonal skills that we need to integrate into our leadership. Because it's not just a delegation, it's not just a strategy, it really is vision, it really is self-awareness, it really is some really basic internal skills that need to be developed. So I love doing that through the Greater You Leadership Series. So you can find us, I don't know if you asked that, but you can get to us on www.thegreateryouleadership.com. And the reason I wanted to put that there is so I could let you know that's where you're going to go, so that you can sign up for our Confidence in Reach course. It is our signature workshop. This is our 8th cohort. Like I said, I always keep this particular class small. It's about 10 normally get together and we really deep dive and explore our confidence and come out better individuals and better leaders, and just more equipped to move forward. So that's June 17th here in Memphis, Tennessee from 9 to 4 p.m. But guess what? If you can't make it here in Memphis, we will come to you wherever you are. So that's coming up. And then we always have our initiative, Women Leaders Walk the Talk, where we like to bring on women leaders, different backgrounds, different industries, and we talk monthly about different topics. So look out for the next one on June 22nd. And you can visit our website for more details on that as well.
Great. I love it. So greateryouleadershipseries.com, right?
Correct.
I'm going to make sure that I put that in the show notes. And there was something I was going to ask you. I think you talked about. Oh, yes, I got it. So the people that as people are hearing you, as we wrap up the podcast episode, people that should be contacting you, not just big corporations, not just schools who want you to come teach and, talk to the students, but any person, if you could just kind of take a moment, who should be, what's your call to action?
My call to action is anyone who wants to better develop their leadership skills and wants to do it with those interpersonal and intrapersonal skills that we talk about, right? It's the man that's been in leadership forever. Maybe he's at the top of the corporation. It's the young person who maybe just aspires to develop their leadership skills for their on-campus activities that they're a part of, right? And I neglected to use the coaching part earlier. I forgot to mention it, but the coaching services, it may be someone looking for one-on-one communication to kind of just, talk and really work some existing challenges that they're having. So it really is for the large corporation or the one individual who wants to speak and have their voice heard and work on some goals, and everyone in between. So I know that's a wide net, but
yeah, no, I love that. Thank you. That was very helpful. Well, Christin, oh my gosh, I'm so honored to spend this time with you. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish to share in a few seconds?
Oh, I got to use this. You cannot stumble upon greatness. You walk up to it and introduce yourself. You said it earlier, but I always like to leave that with people because we were born and we are equipped with every single thing that we need. We are great already. We just have to be intentional every single day and make sure that we are ready to sharpen and get better in our greatness, and then spread that to others. So you cannot stumble upon greatness. You walk up to it and introduce yourself.
Yes, I love it. And then your social media handles that you share with people, is it the Greater You Leadership Series? Is there a particular one that you want to share?
You can find me with any handle at the Greater You Leadership. Didn't put the series on the end, just kind of make it short and easy for you. But yep, at the Greater You Leadership. And that's on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Christin. Y'all, I hope that you took some notes. Blow Christin up, get connected, get plugged in. She is somebody. You probably heard the saying, you got to have at least 5 people that are in your network that can help you become greater. Christin needs to be one of your 5 people. So connect with her, tune into her leadership series, tune into her podcast, schedule a consultation with her. You may not know that you need her until you're talking with her. You may not know that you need her until you didn't even know that you needed her until this podcast episode. Sometimes that's what self-awareness. If we're blinded to our stuff, we may not know what we need until we're like, oh, that's me. And so hopefully you got oh, that's me in your spirit, in your heart, in your mind. And so this has been Wendy Jackson. I am so honored that you tuned in today. I'll be back next time with another amazing episode.